Hey guys, it's me, CGSky. I know I've been gone for a while, but here's something fun that I did recently and I thought I'd share it with all of you. I gave a small presentation on the level design in our open world driving game Til Nord in my university, and I thought it would be interesting for you guys to also get those insights, so here's the entire presentation for you. I hope you enjoy. So I wanted to give a short presentation on some of the learnings we got from designing an open world for our student game in year 3 called Til Nord. It's a snowmobile driving game, and I will quickly show you a bit of our early access release trailer. So this is kind of what the result looks like right now. So you're a guy driving around on your snowmobile in this environment in Norway, and it's very inspired by the Lofoten Islands, and you have variable missions that you can do, and there's jumps, and yeah, just you're free to explore the environment and do whatever you want. So how does this start? For the people that have already been through year 3, you probably had the same thing. In year 3 at the beginning, we got a brief. So we got a bunch of requirements for this project that we had to fulfill. So just in general, this was for snowmobiles, arcade controls, jumps. It had to be open world, and it had to be a realistic environment. We wanted to focus on using landmarks to aid with the player navigation, and we also wanted to encourage exploration with the gameplay. So we focused more towards exploration and less towards the racing aspect, which would have turned it into a completely different game. We had to have a day and night cycle, and we had to incorporate level streaming, which was a very useful experience for us. And also weather effects and various cool other things. So at the beginning, we had to find out how are we going to do this. So we asked a bunch of questions that we wanted to answer. Specifically for level design, those were the questions that are outlined here, like where does the game take place, how large is the environment, how long does the game take, how many biomes are we going to have, how many points of interest, how are we going to generate the terrain, and what is the art style that we're going for, and how are we going to implement all the gameplay in the environment. On the right here you can see one of my node map sketches, just to get an idea of how we can set up the game world. We decided to go for like different areas that we can then shuffle around and have different things happen in. But this changed a lot throughout the entire project, as you will see. So during the first block, we did a lot of research and analyzing to get a good base for the project. We looked a lot at environments, so we knew that we wanted to set it in Norway. So we looked a lot at Google Maps and flew around in Norway digitally to find out what is the landscape like there, what do the towns look like, what kind of props are around there. We also looked at other games that featured maps that are set in the same area. So there was a map in Battlefield 5 that featured the Lofoten Islands. So that also helped us to get an idea of, okay, what kind of props did they focus on to accurately represent the area. Importantly, since it's a driving game, we looked at other driving games as well, mainly Steep and Forza Horizon 4. They also are open world games, so we looked at what they do to keep players engaged and how they guide the player around the map and what kind of features they use in their maps as well. But we also looked at other open world games to see what they do specifically to make their levels interesting. And this is, for example, Death Stranding that we looked at as well. We had a similar idea to use different roughness for the terrain to make traversal a bit of a challenge in the game. But unfortunately, we had to cut that feature mostly because it was too difficult for us to get it working properly. So some of the things that went well during this research and analyzing phase was that we got a good understanding of the requirements of the project and the possibilities that we had and were able to achieve. We were struggling a little bit with the requirements, though, especially in terms of gameplay, since the requirement was to have a snowmobile and a realistic environment. We were having a hard time finding out, okay, how can we actually give the player a lot of fun things to do, and we decided against more of the arcadey things that other games may have, like lots of ramps and crazy tricks and loops and stuff that you can do, in favor of more of an exploration gameplay loop where you have to find specific items or interesting locations, and the gameplay gets mostly rewarding through that. The thing that we could have definitely done better here is also spend more time working in gym levels and setting up proper metrics. This was, for a lot of us, the first racing game or driving game that we worked on. So personally, I found it hard to kind of figure out what metrics were important to track there. And also, since the level design really relies a lot on the environment and the shapes that you get with the environment, we found it hard to kind of create like classical moments in a gym level as you would in a first person shooter game, or anything that is more like corridor based or something like that. So, and another thing that also made this difficult was that the vehicle was constantly changing all the way throughout the project. It's still being changed from time to time, so metrics might change here and there, and a few jumps will have to be adjusted down the road. From that phase, we went on to sketching. I found this very useful to do on paper, to just get some ideas out, like what is the gameplay we can actually do, trying to figure out some of the interesting level design ingredients. A lot of it came down to different jumps that you can do with the snowmobile, because what else do you really do with a snowmobile? You like climb up mountains and you jump down them. That's the main thing. We had a bunch of level design questions there as well that we tried to answer, and from that we decided that the map should be split up into 4 zones, with each zone having a bit of its own gameplay theme. As you can see in the bottom right image, so we have like one zone that has the town in it, the other zone has a glacier or a mountain, and a forest. So that way we already established, like, okay, what is going to be there in the environment, and we don't have to start completely from scratch. With this, in block A, we went quite overboard. We thought we can do a lot more than we actually can. At the start, we wanted to use real-world location or a real-world environment as a base and actually place our game in it. But the area that was picked was a very huge map. You can see it was like 72 square kilometers, which is huge. And we just experimented at the beginning with sketching to figure out, okay, what would roads kind of look like on a landscape like this? How would the network work, and where would towns be placed? So that was a good exercise to do as a team with the level designers, to kind of have everyone create their own map sketches to see, okay, what would people want to do, and how would this look like realistically. But we really had to adjust the scope going further down the block. So what the main learning here was to start smaller and expand later, really find a good base, and then kind of maybe start in a small circle and then expand outwards once you have that part figured out. And another learning was that real-world locations as a baseline can be limiting, especially when you have to find the perfect environment to kind of fit with the gameplay you plan. You want like one mountain, you want a river, you want a lake, you want like a town, and so on. It gets really hard to find that exact spot somewhere in the world. So in the end, it can be a lot easier to just create it yourself from scratch. Just a little bit about documentation. Of course, we used the standard stuff. Level design document was very useful throughout the project. We used it mainly to track the kind of goals that we had, and also to brainstorm ideas for points of interest, for example. So here you can see a list of all the ideas that we came up with, and the bold ones are the ones that we ended up having in the game. We also created an asset list together with the artists, which was really helpful, working with the environment team to make sure that all the art assets that were necessary were created by them or outsourced otherwise. And then conditions of satisfactions were really useful during the production phase as well, where we defined what each aspect of the level has to be like during each phase. So during Blockout 1, Blockout 2, set dressing 1, until the final release quality. So this is where we made a bunch of definitions, and I'll have a template for this condition of satisfaction document at the end of the presentation here, so you can use that if you want. So yeah, creating the map, as I already went into, this is our first attempt using real-world data of Norway. We used a program called Terrain Party, and we picked a place in Norway, and we brought that into Unreal Engine, and it was massive. It had a bunch of mountains in it, and we thought, okay, yeah, we can totally do this. But during Block A, we quickly found out that we cannot do this. We scaled it down to 1/4 of this map, and still this was too big. So in the end, it ended up being like 1/10 of what we originally thought the size can be. So here's the second attempt. This was during Block B. I found a really cool workflow that worked for me quite well for generating height maps. That's something I struggled with in the past, and this way, yeah, I used Blender to kind of block out the general terrain shapes. So very simple, you can place down mountains and the general land mass, and you can kind of just quickly throw stuff together, put that into Unreal, and actually test the size of it and see what it's like to play it. And then afterwards, using a program called World Machine, you can generate a realistic height map from that has all the erosion effects and all the weathering and all the stuff that makes the terrain look really interesting and realistic. So that was a really important step, and being able to import that 3D model into there was really useful. Then we split this map up into streaming levels. So we had 16 different levels that were streamed in depending on the player location. And this was also very useful because we had 4 level designers on the project, and we could assign 4 of these levels to each level designer so they could work alongside each other. So you can see here in this map as well, this was our initial scope for this level. What ended up being the final map was pretty much only this section A here that I started working on during Block B, and some of the islands here. Unfortunately, most of this other content up here had to be scrapped as well because of some problems that I'll get into in a bit as well. But yeah, we ended up splitting this. As you can see, it's also over 3 different levels. So we split those levels up between the level designers as well. And that way, the level designers that had their part removed had another part to work on. So yeah, that's how when we went into Blockout stage, we started populating the world. And here it was important to think about where the points of interest should be placed. How do we want to guide the player through the environment? How do the roads work? Because players will mostly follow roads if you give them to players. So you try to encourage them to explore by getting off the road sometimes by placing interesting things around the roads. We wanted to have a few cool vistas that the player could get to and get a really good sense of the scale of the world. And of course, we had to plan how the missions would work, what the goals would be, and if we can incorporate any interesting gameplay moments. And during this, we mainly used like rocks and the bigger buildings that we could use. And there we experimented a lot with the possible points of interest that we could place. Everything had to fit the theme as well. So this was definitely a creative challenge to find out, okay, can we really put a military facility somewhere in this map, even though it's like somewhere all the way up in Norway where there's not a lot of military or something, but it would be cool. But so there were a lot of discussions like this, what makes sense to place. Also, these windmills that were blocked out here were something that was discussed a lot because there aren't a lot of windmills in Norway. But we thought that they look cool because they really draw the player over, and we had some ideas for missions there as well. So they ended up staying in the game. But yeah, that's something where we went a little bit off the reference and used a bit of our creative freedom. So yeah, here's something as well that's interesting. We used a heat map to track where the players go and where they drive around, and this is how the level ended up shipping. So all the stuff where no players are, that got all cut, or you can't actually go there. And this was helpful to us to mainly find out, okay, where can we improve the placement of some points of interest, and
yeah, just the routes. As you can see, also most of these are following some sort of road or doing a time trial where, yeah, you have to race through a couple of checkpoints. And yeah, the text is mirrored because the heat map was mirrored 2 times for some reason when it was rendered out by our programmer. So in order to line it up with all our top-down maps and so on, we had to mirror it twice to get it to fit. Yeah. Right. From that, we went on. The blockout was done. It was good enough. We decided, okay, it's time to start set dressing. Otherwise, we're gonna have trouble. So yeah, this is when we started working with the environment artists very closely. We created and maintained the asset list, and this was very useful because level designers could just request assets to be added, and the environment artists would create the stuff for us. It was really good at the start of Block C. A lot of like the assets we knew we wanted were already done. So like the trees and the houses were kind of getting worked on, and the level designers were able to implement those. And yeah, here's one thing for the level designers as well. Since we only had 4 artists, it was important that we help out our art team as much as possible. So that meant that if you couldn't find, there was no time to create a certain asset, or it was a very generic asset that you can find online, then yeah, use your resources you have and find assets online. Asset libraries definitely are your friend in big projects like this. We used a ton of Megascans assets, and yeah, this really helped us get to the realistic look of the game, and also allowed our artists to focus on the custom assets like the lumber mill and the military or the research facility that ended up in the game. And those things wouldn't have been able to be done if the artists were working on realistic rocks for the entire project. And yeah, here communication with the artist's team is key. Make sure to ask artists before you implement an asset as well, so that they can double check and see if it fits with their pipelines. This is definitely something I was guilty of as well. Sometimes I just implemented a few things without asking, and then they saw it in the build and they were like, who added this weird looking like silo in here? The texture looks so bad, and what's going on? And so we had to fix that afterwards. So yeah, don't do that if you want to stay friends with your artists. But yeah, together with this teamwork, we can make great things work and get from this blockout stage to something that looks very nice. And what was really fun for the level designers as well, this project, was that they were able to do a lot of the set dressing work as well. So we ended up all feeling a little bit like Bob Ross there, placing happy little rocks and trees and stuff. So yeah, this was mainly the takeaways, or the things that went well, where the communication was great with the art team. The level designers created a strong base with the set dressing work. Unfortunately, there was a lot of manual work, especially all the rocks had to be placed manually, because we had a procedural tool that was supposed to do that, but it didn't really work out this way. So we had to end up doing the work manually instead. The asset list could have been used more by both teams as well to facilitate the communication a little bit better. So that's something where the leads have the responsibility to encourage people using those. Yeah, something to keep in mind as well, especially when you have a game where players can pretty much go anywhere, is that level collisions can be very tricky to handle, especially if you scale a rock very big, like the collisions gets really inaccurate. So make sure you use some sort of tools. We ended up using Houdini in the end to generate manual collision for the rocks that just improved the way the players can drive over them. And always have a backup plan in case a big tool like procedural tools and so on goes wrong. Yeah, so that's the things that you have to keep in mind for projects like this. Okay, here's a quick timeline going from Block A, kind of a few screenshots of how things went. Again, research and concepting phase, figuring out, okay, how would the layout of a town look like, and building the first prototype, which you can see down here in the bottom right. Then we went to pre-production, completely redid the map, blockout, and planning of the of all the missions and all the goals. During Block C was when the main work happened. It really felt like a lot got done during this time. We planned out the individual sections a lot more, placing collectibles and so on, and really, yeah, just iterated, tested, and continued iterating. This is where the downscoping happened as well, where we decided to cut everything above this red line. And yeah, thanks to all of this, we managed to get from something that looked very bare bones to the result which we have now. Yeah, and now during Block D, we're post-release, we released into early access, and now we're mainly focusing on optimization, fixing bugs, creating more content for players, some more missions in the environment, and yeah, increasing the excitement by placing a few more ramps and making it a bit more arcadey now. But yeah, that's some of the feedback we got from players as well. So here are some takeaways, the main things that we learned. It's really great to use projects like this to learn new workflows and experiment with things that you find interesting. I wouldn't have found out about this, the way you can use Blender and World Machine together to create these really cool height maps, if it wasn't for this project. Something that was interesting was to think of the points of interest as like magnets that draw the player towards them, and how you can use that to guide the player from space to space. There's some really interesting YouTube videos and GDC talks on those topics. I'll link them as well at the end of this presentation. Yeah, expand your knowledge by learning from the artists as well. If you're a level designer and you like doing environment art a little bit as well, or at least you want to kind of help out with that, that's always appreciated by the artists. I wrote here that level designers can be quote unquote bad environment artists. So yeah, so that means you're still a level designer. It doesn't mean like you can help out the artists, but in the end, yeah, you have to kind of find the middle ground and then work together with them to get the final quality of it. Yeah. For large worlds, try to use procedural content tools if you can, but have a backup plan in case things don't work out. You might end up spending a lot of time placing rocks for just the entire map. Don't be afraid to cut content, focus on quality over quantity. This is especially important during those big projects during year 3, where you feel like you have a year, you have so much time to do everything, and in the end you have to really focus on just a few things and try to make those really good, instead of having a lot of stuff that just is mediocre. You'll get much better Steam reviews if you focus on that. Yeah, plan your map with level streaming in mind and try to use it in a smart way so that everyone can work together. And again, here iteration is key. You won't get the full picture from the beginning. It will start looking good in the last couple of weeks of the project, and up until then everything will you'll feel like your project is shit until it isn't, basically, and everything comes together. So don't get frustrated by that and just keep putting in the work until it's ready. Here are some of the resources in the presentation. I'll share the link to the presentation in a second here. So it's the condition of satisfaction document. I found this really cool document by a guy on Twitter as well on world design, which is interesting if you want to do this kind of stuff more. This interesting YouTube video on zone of influence is also something I'd really recommend if you don't know where to start with your level design, especially for open worlds. There he has a really interesting approach to populating your map. Yeah, and then there's a bunch of GDC talks and some of my research as well that I did this block. And of course, our game is on Steam, so go check it out and play it and let us know what you think. Yeah, so thank you for listening. I hope you found you got some useful information out of this.
So for those of you that are still here, thank you very much for watching. I hope you found some useful tips in this presentation. And yeah, let me know how it goes for you. How do you guys approach open world level design in your games? And what are some of the things that you learned along the way? I'd be very curious to hear what some of your tips are, and maybe we can share some of these in the comments down below. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll hopefully see you again in the future. Bye.